Well, this is the final week of the 2024-25 OHL regular season, and it's going down to the wire in both the East and Western conferences, with only two teams mathematically eliminated from playoff contention at this point. So, yeah, this has been a really fun season to cover. It feels like it's gone by really fast, but it's been a great journey all along the way. And man, we got playoff hockey just around the corner. So, let's dive into this week's edition of the Power Rankings here on the channel. And if you're new to the channel, this is a Power Rankings that I put together based on a formula that follows the action night in and night out. So this is what I've come up with. And we start off with team number 20, and that's the Guelph Storm. They're down 3 positions this week. And this is a team now focused on the draft lottery and next season. The Storm riding a 10-game losing streak, and right now at the time of recording, tied with the Peterborough Petes for the bottom of the league standings. So for Guelph, they're going to finish the season on the road against the Flint Firebirds tomorrow night. Then they're home to the Erie Otters Thursday. Saturday, they're in Owen Sound. And then they wrap up the regular season at the Sleeman Center against the Kitchener Rangers on Sunday. At number 19, the Peterborough Petes, down 2 positions. And for Peterborough, they're also looking forward to next season and the upcoming draft lottery. And it's just now it's back-to-back years that we won't have playoff hockey at the Peterborough Memorial Center. The Petes, though, they nearly pulled off the win the other night against the Sudbury Wolves, but lost in overtime and now find themselves tied with Guelph with 45 points. This week, just 3 games to wrap up the schedule. Thursday, they're home to the Kingston Frontenacs, and then they end the year on the road Friday in Brampton, and then Sunday in Oshawa. At number 18, I have the Niagara Ice Dogs. They're up 2 positions this week. And there was some good news for the Ice Dogs as Owen Flores returned to action against the Erie Otters over the weekend. It was a 5-2 win, so they got back in the win column. They are still 1-2. Last week was their record, and 2-7-1 over their last 10 games. So it has been a struggle here as they finish out the regular season. Niagara 3 points back of Sudbury for 6th in the Eastern Conference. They do have 3 games remaining, so they still have something to play for here in the final week, which is good news for Niagara as they try and gain some momentum for the first round of the playoffs get underway. Now to finish out the season, they're home to Ottawa Thursday. Friday, they're home to North Bay. And then they wrap up the season against the Barrie Colts on Saturday, which could be a first-round playoff preview. At number 17, the Sarnia Sting. I have them up 2 positions from last week. And the Sting, they've been putting in the effort as they fight for their playoff lives. 0-2-1 was their record last week, and in all 3 games, 1-goal losses. Evan Millette, he was unreal in the game in Barrie, and for Millette, he did everything he could to help the Sting hold on to that 1-goal lead, but Kayshawn Aitchison, of course, would tie it in the final minute of the third, and then Anthony Romani with the goal in overtime to seal it. So the Sarnia Sting, not out of it yet. They're tied for 8th with Owen Sound in the West. So if it remains tied, then it will be a 1-game playoff between the Owen Sound Attack and the Sarnia Sting. And the Attack, they would have home ice as they have the tiebreaker. So exciting times right down to the wire here. For Sarnia, they'll be in Windsor on Thursday. Friday, they're home to Flint. And then a big showdown against the Sioux Greyhounds on Sunday as the Sioux, a team they're trying to catch in the Western Conference standings. At number 16, the North Bay Battalion, down 2 positions for the Battalion, slipping at the wrong time. They went 0-2-1 last week, although they did have some tough opponents, Brantford, Kitchener, and Barrie. North Bay right now just 2 points ahead of Ottawa for the final playoff spot in the East. 3 games remaining, so it's going right down to the wire as well in the Eastern Conference race. This week for the Battalion, they're home to Oshawa Thursday. Friday, they travel to Niagara, and then Sunday, they're home to the Sudbury Wolves. At 15, it's the Flint Firebirds. They fell 4 positions this week. And the Firebirds, they've only needed 1 point to clinch a playoff spot, but they went 0-2 last week, and they lost to both Owen Sound and the Sioux, who are right now chasing them in the Western Conference standings. I do expect Flint to clinch a playoff spot, but if a seed of doubt has been planted into this team, it may have been those 2 losses to the Attack and the Greyhounds. So we'll see how Flint recovers. They do have a busy week coming up to wrap up the season. It starts Tuesday at home against the Guelph Storm. Friday, they're in Sarnia. Saturday, they take on Saginaw. And then Sunday, they're in Saginaw. At 14, I have the Ottawa 67s, who are up two positions, and you can kind of tell which teams are fighting for their playoff lives based on the power rankings. And that includes Ottawa, who had a big win over Oshawa. Then they got a point in an overtime loss against the Kingston Frontenacs. For the 67s, 2 points back in North Bay for the final playoff spot, 3 games remaining, but they're all on the road, which could be a little tricky here for the Barber Poles as they try and clinch that playoff spot. Thursday, they're in Niagara. Saturday, they're in Erie. And then on Sunday, they visit the Brantford Bulldogs. At 13, I have the Sudbury Wolves. They fell one position this week. The Wolves' 5 game winning streak came to an end with a loss to the Brantford Bulldogs. And then in their overtime win over Peterborough, they lost the services of Quentin Musty due to injury. So not sure at this point the extent of the injury to Quentin Musty, but that's going to be a big loss if he's unavailable going into the postseason. The Wolves, they sit sixth right now in the Eastern Conference, 3 points up on Niagara. So going 2-1 over their last 3 games would clinch sixth spot, but still keep an eye on Quentin Musty here as we get ready for the playoffs. Coming up this week, they're home to the Sioux on Wednesday. Friday, they host Oshawa, and then Sunday, they visit the North Bay Battalion. At number 12, I have the Owen Sound Attack. They're up one position, and it's been an exciting finish for Owen Sound in this final stretch. 2-1 was their record last week, and they nearly were 3-0. They just couldn't hold off the Kitchener Rangers comeback on Saturday night. But also to note, Pierce Bowie set a new rookie point record in franchise history, 48 points, passing Joey Hishin's previous record of 47. So this team, they've got a great foundation going forward. And in a rebuilding season where it looked like playoffs were in doubt, they've poured it on since the OHL trade deadline. The Attack right now tied with Sarnia for the final playoff spot, 1 point back of the Sioux and 6 points back of Flint. This week, they're in Barrie on Thursday. Friday, they're in Kitchener. And then Saturday, they're home to the Guelph Storm. At number 11, the Sioux Greyhounds, the biggest climber this week, up 4 positions. And the fight for the final playoff spot, I think, has brought the best, it seems, out of the Sioux Greyhounds right now. They did start the week with a loss in Windsor, but then 2 big wins over Sarnia and Flint, who they're battling with for the final playoff berths in the West. The Greyhounds are right now 7th in the conference, 1 point ahead of Owen Sound and Sarnia, and 5 points back of Flint. So they could still finish as high as 6th in the Western Conference standings. This week, they're in Sudbury on Wednesday. Friday, they're home to Saginaw. And then they wrap up the season with a huge game against Sarnia. And that, of course, is at GFL Memorial Gardens. At number 10, I have the Erie Otters. No change from last week. It was a pretty busy week for Erie. They were 2-2 in their 4 games. Mathematically, the Otters have a chance for home ice advantage in the first round of the playoffs, but they're 5 points back of Saginaw with 3 games remaining. So they do need to win their last 3, and the Spirit need to lose their final 3 games to make it happen. But this week, they're going to be in Guelph Thursday. They're home to Ottawa on Saturday. And then Sunday, they're home to London. So it all depends on what lineup the Knights decide to go with on the final night of the OHL regular season. And then we have the Oshawa Generals. They're sitting at number 9, down 3 positions from last week. And I have been surprised with the recent play of the Generals. They were 1-1 last week. They're 5-4-1 over their last 10 games. We've gone into a bit of a slide here. Beckett Seneca, he was also suspended 2 games for a slew foot in the game against Ottawa. They're 5 points back of Brantford for first in the East Division with 3 games remaining. So winning the division in back-to-back years kind of looks like a long shot right now. And a meeting with Brampton in the first round seems pretty likely at this point, but they still have a chance to catch Kingston. And if they end up in third, well, then you're looking at a potential matchup with either Sudbury or Niagara. So a lot still up to be decided in the Eastern Conference. And this week for the Oshawa Generals, they're going to be on the road Thursday night. Friday, they're in Sudbury. Sunday, they're home to Peterborough. And that Thursday game, actually, that's going to be in North Bay. At number 8, the Saginaw Spirit. They're down 3 positions this week. They had a 1-1 record last week, a 3-1 loss to London, and then a 6-5 win over Windsor in a shootout. I do treat shootouts kind of like a tie in the power rankings formula. Saginaw, they cannot finish any higher than 4th in the West, and right now 5 points ahead of Erie with 3 games remaining. So we now know that it will be the Saginaw Spirit and the Erie Otters in the first round. It's just who's going to have home ice. So that's the only series right now that we can confirm at this point will be matching up in the first round of the playoffs. So Saginaw Erie, a fascinating matchup in the postseason. This week, though, for Saginaw to finish out the schedule, they're in Sault Ste. Marie Friday. Saturday, they're in Flint. And then Sunday, they're home to Flint. At number 7, I have the Barrie Colts up one position, and the return of Tristan Bertucci, it's been paying off. He returned to the lineup Saturday against the Sarnia Sting after missing a month due to mono, but what he brings to the team is what this team's been missing. He brings confidence while carrying the puck out of the zone through the neutral zone, and then he also is great with keeping the puck in the offensive end and getting pucks deep to create that momentum and that persistent pressure that we didn't really see much of over the last few weeks with the Barrie Colts. It would seem to be you enter the zone, you get the shot, and then the transition is going the other way. And the Barrie Colts are being heavily outshot at times. The game in Brampton, they gave up 51 shots in a 4-1 loss to the Steelhead. So it's been great to see Bertucci back. Obviously, it's going to take him time to get his game legs ready, but with these last few games before the playoffs, this will come in handy for him. Also to note, Kayshawn Aitchison set a new single-season record for goals by a defenseman in franchise history with goals 24 and 25. So congrats to Kayshawn Aitchison. Now for Barrie, technically they have a chance to catch Brantford for first in the Eastern Conference, but at this point it seems likely they will finish second, which means a meeting with either Niagara or Sudbury in the first round. Coming up this week, though, for the Colts, they're home to Owen Sound on Thursday, and then they're home to Niagara on Saturday, which could be a playoff preview for the first round. At number 6, I have the Brampton Steelheads up 3 positions, and it was a solid week for the Steelheads. Their record was 3-1 last week. Started with an 8-6 loss to Sudbury, but they recovered well with wins over Peterborough, Barrie, and Niagara. For Brampton, they have clinched 5th in the Eastern Conference at this point. So for them, they're just waiting to see who their first round opponent will be. Right now, it looks like it'll either be Oshawa or Kingston. At number 5, I have the Kingston Frontenacs. They're down 1 position this week, and it was a solid week for Kingston. They had a record of 3-0. They were just passed by another team in the power rankings. For Kingston, they're 3 points back of Brantford for first in the East Division, and they have a huge game coming up against the Bulldogs on Friday that I think will kind of decide who finishes first in the East Division. So for Kingston, they're in Peterborough on Thursday. Friday, they're home to Brantford, and then Sunday, they're in Brampton. At number 4, the Windsor Spitfires. They're up 3 positions this week, and it was a busy week for the Spitfires, and they made the best of it. A 3-0-1 record last week, so 7 out of a possible 8 points. And it's just great to see that Windsor is not packing it in. They're, this is the time where players tend to maybe let up a bit, and some bad habits could creep in. But this is a team that seems to be going right to the finish, which is great. They also got a big win over the London Knights, which is a confidence booster. Although London did not play a full lineup, Denver Barkey was out, so it is that boost to confidence for this team with 2 games remaining. Thursday, they're home to Sarnia, and then Friday, they end the year against the London Knights. At number 3, I have the Kitchener Rangers. No change from last week. Kitchener, they've been on a solid run to finish this regular season. 2-0 was their record last week, and they're riding a 9-game point streak. The Rangers, they have clinched 3rd in the West. It just might come down to the final day to find out who they're playing in the first round of the playoffs. And this week, they're home to London on Tuesday, so there's a big game, a big rivalry game. Friday, they're home to Owen Sound, and then Sunday, they're in Guelph. At number 2, I have the London Knights. They dropped 1 position this week. The Knights, 3-1 was their record. They have clinched the Hamilton Spectator Trophy for first overall, so that means they're going to have home ice advantage throughout the playoffs. And this is back-to-back years where they win the regular season championship. Now, I wouldn't be too concerned about the loss to Windsor last night. It was a surprise, though, to see them give up 8 goals to the Spitfires. Denver Barkey was out of the lineup, but he should be ready to go come playoff time. Cam Allen also returned to the Knights lineup yesterday. I know there's a lot of controversy around that with fans around the OHL, but Allen has been deemed eligible to return, and he was back in the lineup against the Windsor Spitfires yesterday. Now, coming up for the Knights, Tuesday they're in Kitchener, Friday they're home to Windsor, and then they wrap up the season in Erie on Sunday. So at number 1, that leaves the Brantford Bulldogs, who are up 1 position, and this is the second time this season the Bulldogs have taken top spot in the power rankings. Brantford 2-0 on their trip through North Bay and Sudbury last week, extending their winning streak to 4 games, and they're now 8-2 over their last 10 games. This team, they still have something to play for here into this final week. 3 points up on Barrie with a game in hand, and 3 points up on Kingston. So it's going to be interesting to see how things play out at the top of the Eastern Conference standings. And this week for Brantford, they're home to Brampton on Wednesday. Friday, they're in Kingston. And then Sunday, they're home to the Ottawa 67. So that's how I see it from the booth. Now, next week, I'm going to do the power rankings a little different. I'm going to do the season average as we go into the playoffs because some teams are going to start resting some players going into this final week. So it's kind of a mixed bag of what we can expect as we finish out the regular season. So I figured to wrap up the power rankings for the year, next week I will do an average to see how teams did over the course of the regular season before we kick off the 2025 OHL playoffs. And of course, I will be doing playoff previews for every series before it gets underway, as it's an exciting time of year. Playoff hockey is the best, and we may see at least one tie-breaking game to decide the final playoff spot in the Western Conference, and maybe we'll see it in the East as well. Ottawa 2 points back the North Bay Battalion. Do we see a sudden death game in the East and the West? It just adds to the excitement for junior hockey fans. So again, thank you very much for all your support. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Talk to you again soon.